This is my true story. I was a husband who thought he had everything: a home, a loving wife, and peace after long working days. For 18 years, I took the same pills every night, the ones she said helped me rest. I never questioned it. I never thought the person I trusted most was the reason I couldn't see the truth right in front of me. But one night, I stayed awake. And what I saw in my own house destroyed everything I believed about love. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. And please subscribe so more people can hear my story. For 18 years, my life followed the same routine. I woke up early, went to work, came home tired, and trusted my wife with everything. She managed the house, paid the bills, and always had dinner ready when I returned. She would smile when I walked in and say I looked exhausted. Then she'd hand me a small white pill with a glass of water. She said it was to help me sleep, to calm my nerves after long days. I believed her. I never questioned why I needed it every night. I thought it was love. The first few months, the pills helped. I slept through the night and woke up rested. I thanked her for taking care of me. She told me she wanted me to stay healthy. That was enough for me. I didn't know that while I rested, another version of my life was happening behind closed doors. I was too blind to see it. I never missed a single night. Even when I traveled, she packed them for me. She said they kept my body strong. If I ever forgot, she reminded me before bed, saying I'd wake up tired if I didn't take one. So I took it. 18 years of blind habit. 18 years of silence and trust. I never thought anything could be wrong. She made everything seem perfect. Every morning, my clothes were ironed. The house smelled clean. The meals were cooked. She smiled like someone who had nothing to hide. I told friends I was lucky to have her. I used to say she was the reason my life stayed balanced. I didn't realize how carefully she kept me asleep, not just in bed, but in life. On weekends, she said I snored too loudly and kept her awake. She told me she preferred to read in the other room after I fell asleep. I never thought twice about it. I thought she just needed space. I didn't know she had a whole other reason to stay up when I couldn't. Looking back, there were signs. Late-night phone calls she said were her sister. Strange perfume smells that didn't belong to her. Clothes folded twice when I remembered wearing them once. But I ignored all of it because trust makes you blind. I loved her too much to suspect her. When you live with someone that long, you stop noticing small things. You believe what you want to believe. I thought loyalty meant never doubting her. I didn't understand that loyalty without awareness becomes weakness. She took advantage of that. She wasn't just giving me medicine. She was giving me permission to disappear from my own life. Every pill I swallowed made it easier for her to live hers freely. She didn't have to hide phone calls or footsteps. She just had to wait until I drifted off. And then the night was hers. I still remember one evening when she sat beside me, smiled, and said she couldn't sleep without me. She said it while handing me that pill. I didn't know how much truth was hidden in those words. She really couldn't sleep without me being unconscious. Because if I stayed awake, her secret life would have ended. 18 years I trusted that woman. 18 years I believed those pills were care. 18 years of nights stolen from me while I slept peacefully beside betrayal. Every night looked the same. I'd come home, eat dinner, take the pill, and fall asleep before the clock struck 10. I never questioned the pattern. She made it sound normal, even caring. She said routine was good for the body and mind. I believed her because I wanted to. It felt safe to have structure. Dinner at 8, pill at 9, lights out by 10. I thought I was lucky to have a wife who cared so much about my rest. I didn't realize the routine was built for her, not me. At first, the pills just made me sleepy. Then they made me heavy. Some nights I'd try to stay awake to watch a late show or talk, but I couldn't. My body would shut down like a switch had been flipped. I'd wake up 8 hours later, groggy and confused. I never remembered falling asleep, only waking up. I thought that's how strong medicine worked. I didn't know it was making me disappear from my own nights. She used to say she stayed in the other room because of my snoring. She said it gave her headaches. So every night after I fell asleep, she'd take a blanket and leave quietly. I thought she went to read or watch TV. Sometimes I'd wake up briefly around 1 a.m. and hear faint noises, footsteps, maybe a door creaking. I convinced myself it was the house settling. I told myself I was imagining things. That became my life for almost 2 decades. I'd go to work, come home tired, take the pill, sleep, wake up, and repeat. I never noticed how often she disappeared in the evenings before bed. She'd say she was folding laundry or locking the back gate. I never checked. I never followed. I trusted her like a fool who thought love erased the need for curiosity. On weekends, I wanted to stay up late with her, watch movies, talk, maybe sit on the porch. But she always said I looked too tired. She'd smile and press the pill into my hand, saying, "Just rest, honey. Tomorrow we'll do something nice." Tomorrow never came. Over the years, I lost pieces of myself to that routine. I stopped reading before bed. I stopped asking questions about her late-night calls. I stopped paying attention. She didn't need to lie big. The small ones worked just fine. She kept me quiet with comfort and medicine, and I was too tired to see the difference. Sometimes, when I woke early, I'd find her already dressed, drinking coffee, and smiling like she'd been awake for hours. She'd say she just couldn't sleep. I'd tell her to rest during the day, but she'd laugh it off. I never thought to ask why she always looked freshly showered at dawn. I thought she was just a morning person. I remember one day when I misplaced the pill bottle. I looked everywhere until she found it for me, tucked behind a shelf in the kitchen. She looked nervous, just for a second, but I didn't notice then. She said she must have moved it while cleaning. I took the pill without thinking twice. I didn't realize that the only thing she was cleaning was her tracks. 18 years is a long time to trust someone. Long enough for habits to replace questions. Long enough for love to blind judgment. My life had become a schedule that belonged to her. I was living by her clock, her rules, her pills. I thought I was being cared for, but I was being managed. Like a piece of furniture she didn't want to move, but needed out of the way. Every night I swallowed peace, not knowing I was swallowing betrayal. She was good at pretending. Every morning she acted like the perfect wife, cheerful voice, clean house, breakfast ready before I left for work. She asked about my day, reminded me to wear my jacket when it was cold, kissed my forehead before I stepped out the door. There was no sign of guilt, no nervous glance, no hesitation. If anything, she seemed proud of how well she managed everything. I thought that was love. But looking back, I see it now. It wasn't love, it was control. She had turned my trust into her weapon. She never raised her voice, never argued, never said anything that would make me suspect her. That was her trick. She didn't need drama to hide her lies. She hid behind calmness. She spoke softly and moved carefully, always 2 steps ahead of me. When I'd come home early, she'd act surprised, like she didn't expect me. But her eyes would flicker for a moment before she smiled. I ignored it every time. I didn't realize how much she managed my life until it was too late. She handled the bills, the appointments, even the groceries. She said it was easier for her to do it all. I thought she was being helpful. Now I know she was making sure I stayed too dependent to question anything. She didn't want me in control of anything, not even my own sleep. Every night followed the same script. She'd make dinner, talk about her day, hand me the pill, kiss me goodnight, and disappear once I was asleep. I used to think she was reading in another room. Sometimes I'd wake up for a few seconds and hear faint noises, drawers closing, footsteps near the kitchen, maybe the back door. But I'd fall asleep again before I could think about it. Those pills weren't just for sleep. They were her way of keeping me out of her world. She made sure I trusted her completely. She said things like, "You work so hard, let me take care of everything." And she did, but not the way I thought. She wasn't taking care of me. She was taking care of herself, keeping me quiet, keeping her secret safe. I remember once waking up around midnight and finding her side of the bed empty. I thought maybe she went to use the bathroom. I waited, half asleep. But she didn't come back for a long time. When she finally did, she smelled different, like men's cologne. I asked if she'd used a new soap, and she smiled, saying she had tried a sample lotion. I believed her. That's how easy it was to fool me. One soft lie, and I'd stop thinking. 18 years she fooled me like that. She didn't cheat once or twice. She built a whole second life inside my home. And the scariest part was how normal it all looked. The house was clean, the meals were hot, and the lies were quiet. She never gave me a reason to fight, never gave me a reason to doubt. She gave me comfort instead. And comfort is the easiest way to keep someone blind. Sometimes after I found out, I tried to remember all those small things. How she always checked the time before giving me my pill. How she never let me lock the back door. How she'd hum quietly right before leaving the room at night. All of it seemed innocent then. Now every small detail feels like a warning I ignored. I trusted her completely, and she used that trust like a shield. She didn't need to hide behind lies because I never asked for the truth. That's what made it so easy for her. I handed her my belief and never took it back. For 18 years, I slept peacefully while she lived freely. It was a small comment that changed everything. One evening, as I was getting the mail, my next-door neighbor waved at me and joked about how popular my house seemed at night. I didn't understand what he meant, so I asked. He said, laughing, that he often saw a dark car parked by my back gate after midnight. He said maybe my wife had friends visiting while I was asleep. I laughed too, but it didn't feel funny. Something in my stomach twisted. I told him he must be mistaken, that maybe it was a delivery truck or someone turning around. But inside, I knew something was wrong. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I sat at the kitchen table longer than usual, pretending to read the newspaper, but my mind was somewhere else. My wife moved around the house as she always did, humming, cleaning, setting things in place. When she handed me the pill, I took it without saying anything, but I didn't swallow it. I let it sit under my tongue until she turned away, then slipped it into my pocket. It felt strange to break a habit that had lasted 18 years. I lay in bed pretending to sleep. My breathing slowed, my eyes stayed closed, and my heart beat fast. Around 10:30, I heard her move. She didn't think I was awake. She checked to see if I was breathing steadily, then quietly got out of bed. I listened as she walked down the hall. Her steps were light, careful, the kind you take when you don't want anyone to hear. Then came the sound I had ignored for years, the faint click of the back door. I waited, listening to the air conditioner hum, to the silence after it. Minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 20. Then I heard another sound, a car door closing outside. My chest tightened. I got up slowly, every movement quiet, every step heavy with disbelief. I reached the window and saw it, a car I didn't recognize parked just beyond the fence, engine off, lights dimmed. I didn't know what to think. I wanted to believe it was nothing. I wanted to believe the neighbor was wrong. But deep down, something told me this was the truth I had been sleeping through for nearly 2 decades. I sat on the edge of the bed until I heard her footsteps again. She came back around midnight, moving quickly, quietly, like she had done it many times before. When she climbed back into bed, I could smell something faint but sharp. Cologne, not mine. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I just lay there, staring into the dark, hearing her breathing beside me. Every sound in the room felt louder. The ticking clock, the rustling sheets, the beating of my heart. My mind was screaming, but my body stayed still. I had no proof, only suspicion. But that was enough to kill sleep completely. The next morning, she acted normal. Breakfast on the table, her same smile, the same soft tone. She talked about going to the store later. I watched her hands move, her eyes shift when she talked. I realized how easily she lied, how easily I believed. For the first time, I didn't take the pill that night. I told her I felt fine without it. She looked nervous, but smiled anyway. She said I should still take it, just to be safe. I told her maybe tomorrow. That night I decided I wouldn't sleep. Not until I saw the truth with my own eyes. That night, I stayed awake for the first time in 18 years. The house was dark and silent. Every shadow felt heavier than usual. I lay still, pretending to breathe slow like I was asleep. Around 10, she came into the room, checked my face, then turned off the lamp. She waited a few seconds and whispered softly to herself before leaving. The floor creaked under her feet, careful and slow. I heard the faint sound of the back door open. That same sound I had ignored for nearly 2 decades. I got up, moving quietly, every muscle tight. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the kind of anger that hides behind disbelief. I reached the hallway and stopped when I saw the glow of the porch light. It flickered once. Then I heard a laugh. Not hers alone, but another voice. A man's voice. Deep, confident, familiar. I stepped closer, just enough to see through the narrow crack between the door and the wall. She was standing in the kitchen wearing a robe, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. The man leaned against the counter like he'd done it 100 times. His jacket hung on the chair, the same one where I used to hang mine. My chest went tight. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. She reached for his hand, and when he pulled her close, I froze. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. 18 years of trust, 18 years of love, 18 years of marriage, all shattered in 1 second. I pushed the door open, and it hit the wall hard. They both turned. The look on her face told me everything I needed to know. Guilt, fear, shock. It was all there. The man stumbled back, grabbed his jacket, and ran out through the back door without saying a word. She stood there, trembling, covering her mouth, trying to think of something to say. But there was nothing left to explain. The house felt different now. The air was heavy, the lights too bright. I looked around and saw the life I had built. The furniture we bought together, the family photos on the wall, the kitchen table where we used to eat breakfast. And it all looked fake. Every corner of that house had been touched by betrayal. She tried to speak, but I didn't listen. My body was numb. I walked past her, sat down at the table, and stared at the bottle of pills sitting there. The label blurred in my vision. My hands clenched until the paper tore. That was the night I stopped being her husband. That was the night I realized I had been a stranger in my own home for nearly 2 decades. She had been living another life right beside me, laughing, loving, and lying while I slept. All those nights I thought she was reading quietly in another room. She was entertaining someone else. Every good-night kiss was a lie wrapped in habit. I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. I just sat there and watched her cry. She kept saying it wasn't what it looked like, but the smell of another man's cologne in my house told me the truth before she ever could. The worst part wasn't the cheating, it was knowing how long it had gone on while I was too asleep to stop it. When I finally stood up, I didn't look at her. I walked straight to our bedroom and shut the door behind me. I didn't sleep. I didn't take the pill. I just sat in the dark, listening to the clock tick until morning came. When the sun came up, I was still sitting in the same spot. My head was heavy, my body stiff, but I couldn't move. The air felt thick, the house too quiet. I could hear her in the kitchen, pacing, crying, trying to clean up what had happened, like wiping the floor would erase the truth. She didn't say a word to me. Neither did I. The silence between us was louder than any fight we could have had. I looked around that room and saw every piece of my life, the photos, the furniture, the things I had worked for, and none of it felt like mine anymore. The home I built with love had turned into a shell filled with lies. Every inch of it was touched by betrayal. I thought about the 18 years I spent trusting her. The 18 years I slept through my own life. I thought about how I had been proud to call her my wife while she was spending her nights with someone else under my roof. The weight of it made me sick. I tried to stand up, but my legs felt weak. I leaned against the table, staring at the bottle of pills still sitting there. For nearly 2 decades, I had swallowed those pills every night without question. Every time I took one, I gave her control over my life. She didn't just betray me with another man. She drugged me to make sure I'd never find out. I felt disgusted, not just with her, but with myself. I had trusted her so blindly that I became part of her lie. The house was silent, except for the sound of her moving around, pretending to clean. I could hear her sniffing, whispering to herself. She knew there was no excuse that could fix this. No amount of crying or begging could undo 18 years of deception. I walked into the living room and saw her sitting on the couch, face in her hands, shaking. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I remembered the man's face, his hands on her, his laugh in my house. That pity vanished. She looked up at me, eyes red, trying to speak. I turned away. I didn't need to hear anything. There was nothing left to explain. The damage was already done. The life we had built was gone. Not because of one mistake, but because of thousands of lies stacked over 18 years. Lies told so calmly that they became my normal. Lies whispered every night while I slept in the next room. I walked into the bedroom and opened the closet. Her clothes hung neatly next to mine. I pulled out a box from the shelf, the one where I kept old photos, cards, and letters she had written me years ago. I opened one and read it. It said she couldn't sleep without me. My hands started shaking. The words that once made me feel loved now made me sick. She didn't mean she couldn't sleep without me. She meant she couldn't cheat unless I was asleep. I tore the letter in half and dropped it on the floor. Every memory I had with her felt fake now. Every smile, every word, every kiss. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. That's what betrayal does. It doesn't just break your heart. It breaks your sense of reality. It makes you doubt everything you ever believed. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the doorway where she once stood every night telling me she loved me. I realized love isn't about words or promises. It's about truth. And she hadn't told me the truth in 18 years. That morning, something inside me changed. The man who trusted her died in that chair. The man who woke up that day wasn't the same. He didn't want revenge yet. He just wanted to breathe without choking on lies. The morning light came through the curtains, soft but cruel. It touched everything that used to mean something. The table where we had breakfast, the couch where we watched TV, the kitchen she pretended to clean. I sat there staring at nothing. She stood across the room, quiet, pale, her eyes swollen from crying. I didn't care anymore. My heart had gone cold. When trust dies, love dies with it. There was no way back from what I saw last night. She tried to speak, her voice low, shaking, but I didn't listen. I didn't need her words. They were the same words she'd probably used for years to hide what she was doing. Every excuse was meaningless now. The more she talked, the more I realized how long she had rehearsed her lies. She said things about being lonely, about stress, about how she never meant for it to happen. I stood there staring at her, wondering if she even remembered how to tell the truth. While she talked, I walked around the kitchen. I opened drawers, moved papers, looked at the small things I had ignored before. I found empty pill bottles stacked neatly in the corner. I read the labels. My name. My dosage. Every prescription filled by her. 18 years. She had been in control of every pill I took. She told me they helped me sleep, but now I realized they were just her weapon, her way to keep me quiet, keep me still, keep me blind. It wasn't just cheating. It was manipulation. It was control. She didn't just betray me with another man. She built a system to keep me from ever waking up to the truth. She lived her double life while I was trapped inside the fog she created. The more I thought about it, the more the anger burned. Not the kind that explodes, the kind that stays silent but deep, the kind that changes a person forever. I opened the window to let air in. The cold hit my face, sharp and real. For the first time in years, I felt awake, fully awake. I didn't want to stay in that house any longer. The walls were poisoned with her lies. The photos on the walls felt like strangers looking back at me. I packed a small bag. Just clothes, a few papers, nothing else. She stood there watching me, shaking, saying I couldn't just leave. But she didn't understand. I had already left her the moment I saw what she was doing. My body was still there, but my soul had already walked out the door. I told her nothing. I didn't have to. Silence was enough. When I stepped outside, the sunlight hit my face. It felt strange, like seeing the world for the first time. I walked down the street, hearing cars, people, life, everything I had been too numb to notice for years. I wasn't free yet, but I was finally awake. I didn't know what I would do next, but I knew one thing. She wouldn't win. That night, I slept in a motel. No pills. No lies. The bed was small, the air conditioner rattled, but it was peace. I stared at the ceiling until morning came. My head hurt, my chest ached, but for the first time in 18 years, I slept because I wanted to, not because I was drugged into silence. By morning, I knew what I needed to do. I didn't want revenge out of rage. I wanted justice. I wanted my life back. I wanted her lies to cost her everything she built on my back. The next morning, I woke up in that motel with one clear thought in my head. It was over. The marriage, the lies, the woman I once loved, all of it. There was no saving anything. I had given her 18 years of loyalty, and she had paid me back with betrayal. The only thing left to do was take back what was mine and make sure she never had control over me again. I got dressed and walked straight to my lawyer's office. The same man who handled our property papers years ago looked shocked when I told him what had happened. I didn't need sympathy. I needed action. I handed him the prescriptions, the documents, the proof of manipulation. I wanted everything legally clear, the house, the savings, the assets, all back in my name. She had used my trust to build her comfort. Now I would use the truth to destroy that comfort. We filed for divorce that same day. The papers went out immediately. Every lie she had told became part of the legal record. My lawyer said it would be easy. Her cheating, her use of drugs to control me, her secret meetings. Everything could be proven. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was cleanup. I wanted my life back, and the law was finally on my side. That night, I went back home, not to talk to her, but to gather the last of my things. When I walked in, she was sitting on the couch, eyes red, face swollen from crying. The moment she saw the papers in my hand, she knew it was real. I placed them on the table and said nothing. She opened them, her hands shaking, the color drained from her face. Everything she owned was tied to me. The car, the house, the safe. Vings, all of it. She didn't just lose me, she lost the life she built on lies. Over the next few weeks, the court hearings began. She tried to defend herself, saying it was loneliness, saying it wasn't serious, saying I was exaggerating. The judge didn't care. The evidence was clear. Photos, documents, records, all of it showed years of deceit. When the final ruling came, she lost everything. The house went to me. The accounts were frozen. The car was repossessed. Even the man she cheated with disappeared once the truth came out. She stood there in court, alone, surrounded by silence and shame. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just walked out. The kind of pain she caused doesn't go away with victory. It just becomes quieter. But seeing her finally face the consequences brought me a strange kind of peace. After the divorce, I sold the house. I couldn't live there anymore. Every wall reminded me of her voice. Every room felt poisoned. I took the money and moved far away. A smaller town, a smaller home, just me. I started fresh. The first night in that new place, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. No pills, no lies, just silence. Real silence. Months later, I heard she tried to contact me. Calls, letters, messages. I ignored them all. There was nothing left to say. You can't rebuild something that was never real. She wanted forgiveness, but forgiveness isn't a gift you give to the person who destroyed you. It's something you earn. And she never did. People sometimes ask if I miss her. I don't. I miss who I thought she was. I miss the version of her I loved before I knew the truth. But the woman who betrayed me died the night I saw her in that kitchen. The person left behind was just a stranger wearing her face. Now, when I lie down at night, I sleep because I want to. No pills, no fear, just rest. I learned that peace doesn't come from trusting others. It comes from walking away from the ones who abuse it. The years after the divorce were quiet, and for the first time in a long time, that quiet felt good. No more footsteps at night, no whispers behind closed doors, no fake smiles in the morning. Just me and the sound of my own breathing. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The furniture was old, the walls were plain, but every inch of it felt honest. There were no secrets in that space, and that made it worth more than any big house filled with lies. At first, the nights were hard. I wasn't used to sleeping without the pills. My body had grown dependent on them, not just for sleep, but for peace. The first few weeks, I barely closed my eyes. I lay awake, hearing every sound, thinking about every year I lost. But over time, the silence became a comfort. I started to hear the world again, the wind outside, the cars in the distance, the birds in the morning. I realized I had been living half asleep for 18 years. Now I was finally awake, even if it hurt sometimes. I picked up small jobs to keep myself busy. The money didn't matter much. What mattered was feeling useful again. I fixed fences, repaired chairs, cleaned yards. People paid me, thanked me, and treated me with respect. That was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Respect. It's strange how you can spend years being treated like nothing and start believing it's normal. But once you get your dignity back, you never want to lose it again. Sometimes people in town asked if I had a family. I just said no. It was easier than explaining the truth. I didn't want pity. I didn't want their looks of shock. I just wanted peace. My past was gone, and I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Months turned into years. I started feeling stronger. I cooked my own meals, took walks, met a few people who became friends. They didn't know what I had been through, and I didn't tell them. Some pains are better left unspoken, but they gave me something my wife never did. Real company. They didn't need anything from me. They just liked being around me. One evening, I saw her name on my phone. I hadn't changed my number. I don't know why. Maybe a part of me wanted to know if she would ever try to reach out. She did, many times, but I never picked up. I watched the calls come in and go unanswered. Then one day, a message appeared. She said she missed me, that she was sorry, that she didn't mean to hurt me. I deleted it. Some things don't deserve a reply. After that, I started writing again. I used to write small notes in my younger days. Thoughts, lessons, memories. I filled notebooks with what I had learned from the whole experience. Things like how love can blind you if you let it, how trust without caution is a trap, how peace costs less than pride. Writing became my therapy. It helped me put everything in order. I learned that life doesn't end after betrayal. It just starts differently. You learn to live for yourself instead of for someone else's comfort. You stop asking why people hurt you and start asking why you stayed. And once you understand that, you become stronger than the people who tried to break you. Years passed, and I heard she moved away too. Someone told me she remarried, but it didn't last. I didn't feel anger or satisfaction, just nothing. She became another person in a story I once lived. That's all. Now, every night, I make tea before bed. I open the window and breathe the air. I don't think about the past anymore. I don't need pills, lies, or fake peace. I fall asleep naturally, tired but free. It's been many years now since that night I found out the truth. The pain has faded, but the memory never leaves completely. Sometimes, when I sit by the window, I think about the man I used to be. Quiet, trusting, blind. I think about all the nights I swallowed those pills and drifted off while she lived a second life just a few rooms away. I think about how much time I lost believing I was loved. But then I remind myself, I woke up. I saw the truth. And I walked away. That's something many people never get to do. When you spend years being controlled, you start to forget what freedom feels like. You live on autopilot, doing the same things, saying the same words, never questioning why you feel empty inside. That was me for 18 years. Every routine was a chain I didn't know I wore. It took betrayal to break it. Now, I understand something simple. Sometimes the worst pain is the only thing strong enough to wake you up. People who know me now see a calm man. They think I've always been that way. They don't see the years I lost or the nights I cried until my chest hurt. They don't know how deep trust can cut when it's used as a weapon. But I don't tell them. I don't need to. My peace doesn't depend on anyone understanding my story. It just depends on me never going back to who I was. I learned that love without honesty is just control in disguise. You can live in the same house, share the same meals, even sleep in the same bed. But if truth isn't there, you're alone. My wife taught me that. She taught me that people can smile at you every day and still betray you every night. She taught me that some lies aren't shouted. They're whispered softly enough to sound like care. But I also learned something else. Strength doesn't always look like fighting. Sometimes it's just walking away quietly and never turning back. I didn't ruin her life. I didn't hurt her. I just stopped being part of the lie. That was enough. Her life fell apart on its own because the truth always catches up. It might take months or years, but it always does. Now, I live simply. I make my own food, take care of my plants, and talk to the neighbors. I don't need much. I don't chase money, or company, or love. I just want quiet mornings and honest nights. I've learned that peace doesn't come from what you have. It comes from what you stop tolerating. I stopped tolerating lies. That's how I found peace. Sometimes people ask if I ever forgave her. I don't know. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. Forgiveness isn't about saying it's okay. It's about saying it's over. And for me, it's over. She's not part of my world anymore. She's a lesson, not a memory. Every time I see those sleeping pills in the pharmacy aisle, I remember how small they were, and how big of a lie they carried. I never touched another one after that night. I don't need help to sleep anymore. My mind is clear, my heart is light, and my bed finally feels like my own. If anyone hears my story, I want them to remember this. Never ignore your peace for someone else's comfort. Never mistake control for love. And never stay asleep when something inside you keeps whispering that something isn't right. 18 years of sleep taught me one thing. Peace doesn't come from pills or promises. It comes from walking away from people who don't deserve your loyalty. Final thought. She gave me pills to keep me asleep, but she forgot one thing. Even the deepest sleep ends one day. And when I woke up, I made sure she never slept peacefully again. This is my true story. I spent my whole life working, saving, and building the home I thought I'd die in. Every brick carried years of sweat and sacrifice. I trusted my son with everything, my health, my hope, my legacy. One day he brought me papers and said, "Just sign here, Dad." I didn't ask questions. I believed he was helping me. The next morning, I didn't own my home. My name was gone, and my heart went with it. Before I tell you what I did next, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And please subscribe so my story can reach more people. He came over one evening with a smile that looked practiced. He said he had papers from the bank, something about lowering my bills, refinancing the house, making things easier for me. I didn't understand all the words, but I didn't ask. He was my son. I had trusted him with everything since the day he was born. When he said it was for my good, I believed him. The papers were thick, full of fine print, lines I couldn't read without my glasses. He tapped the page, pointed to where I should sign, and handed me a pen. My hands trembled as I wrote my name. He smiled, patted my shoulder, and said I had done the right thing. I felt proud. I thought I was helping him take care of his family, our family. I didn't know that with each stroke of the pen, I was giving away more than just my signature. I was signing away my home, my safety, and everything I had spent a lifetime protecting. I didn't ask for a copy. I didn't think I needed one. I had always trusted my son more than paper. After he left, I sat in my chair by the window, feeling content. I looked around the room, the pictures on the wall, the old clock ticking beside me, the curtains my late wife had sewn decades ago. I thought I was securing a better future for the family. I didn't know I had just erased my own. That night, I slept peacefully. There was no sign, no warning, no thought that tomorrow would be any different. The air was calm, the house quiet, the world still in order. I had no idea that the next sunrise would take everything from me, not through fire or theft, but through trust. The phone rang early the next morning. I thought it was my son calling to say good morning. Instead, it was a voice from the bank. The man spoke fast, using words I didn't understand at first. Then I heard one sentence that made everything around me blur. "Sir, the ownership of your house has been transferred." I asked him to repeat it. He did. My name was no longer on the deed. My son's was. For a moment, I couldn't move. My hand froze on the receiver. I looked around the house. The same walls I painted, the same roof I repaired after every storm, the same floor where my wife once stood cooking dinner. I felt like a stranger inside my own life. The world hadn't changed, but everything inside me had. I went to the bank that morning. The clerk looked at me with pity. She explained that the documents were legally signed, witnessed, and verified. She showed me copies. My own signature was there. The ink was mine, but the meaning wasn't. The papers I thought were refinancing documents were property transfer papers. I had given away my home without even knowing it. Outside the bank, the air felt heavier. My chest burned as I walked down the street. I passed people smiling, carrying groceries, living normal lives, and I wondered if they knew how easy it was to lose everything with one mistake. The house I had spent 40 years paying off was gone in a night. My lifetime of effort turned into a single sentence on a legal form. When I returned home, I saw his car parked in the driveway. My driveway. He was inside, laughing on the phone, probably talking about his new property. My heart broke in a quiet way, not like glass shattering, but like an old floorboard cracking under too much weight. I sat on the porch steps until the sun went down. The air grew cold, but I didn't move. That night, I realized something important. Paper can take away what blood cannot protect. Trust isn't a signature. It's a test. And I had failed it. I stood outside that house for a long time, staring at the windows that once held our family's laughter. The curtains my wife had stitched fluttered softly, like they were waving goodbye. My feet refused to move. I wanted to believe it was all a mistake, that my son would come out and explain everything. But deep inside, I already knew the truth. I was no longer the owner. I was just an old man standing on land that no longer belonged to him. He stepped out a few minutes later, phone in hand, dressed neatly, smiling as if nothing had happened. He said something about doing what's best for everyone. His tone was light, casual, almost friendly, but every word carried a sting. He spoke as if the home I built, the walls I painted, the roof I repaired, were now just part of his success story. I nodded and said nothing. Sometimes silence hides storms. Inside, the rooms looked different. My chair was moved. The framed photo of my wedding day was gone from the shelf. I asked where it was. He shrugged. I realized then that I wasn't just losing the house. I was losing the respect that once filled it. He told me I could stay for a while, as if I were a tenant, not a father. I thanked him. My voice sounded smaller than I remembered. The following days blurred together. I woke up early as usual, made tea, and sat on the porch. But it wasn't the same. Every creak of the floor reminded me that it wasn't mine anymore. When the mailman came, he greeted my son's name on the envelope. Even the postman had moved on faster than I had. Neighbors whispered. Some avoided eye contact. Some pitied me. I could see it in their eyes. They knew. News travels fast in small towns, especially when it involves shame. They said the old man had signed his house away. They said his son had outsmarted him. Maybe they were right. At night, I walked from room to room, touching the walls, remembering where every memory lived. The corner where my wife used to iron clothes. The kitchen table where my son did his school homework. The front door where I'd watched him leave for college. Now he was back, but not as a son, as an owner. One evening, he told me I shouldn't worry about bills anymore, that I should just relax. It sounded like kindness, but it felt like a warning. I realized I had become a guest in my own life. My keys still worked, but not my name. My heart still beat, but not with pride. That night, I sat outside under the porch light, and something inside me hardened. I didn't cry, I didn't shout, I didn't beg. I simply understood that trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild itself. It calcifies into silence. I made a promise to myself. This humiliation would not be my ending. I might have lost my home on paper, but I hadn't lost my mind. The next morning, when he left for work, I walked around the house slowly, room by room. I noticed the small details he overlooked, the hidden compartments, the old filing box in the attic, the drawer that still held my documents. Somewhere inside that paperwork, I remembered, was the family trust, the one my lawyer had set up long before my wife passed. It was old, dusty, and forgotten, but it was still legal, and it still carried my name. As I closed the drawer and stared at the papers, a thought crossed my mind. Maybe losing everything was the only way to remember what still belonged to me. Not property, not money, but power. The kind of quiet, patient power that comes from knowing more than they think you do. That night, for the first time in days, I slept peacefully. Because while my son thought I was finished, I had already started again. Not with anger, but with preparation. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. My son had already left for work. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the table with those old papers I found in the attic. The folder was worn, the corners yellow, the ink fading. But as I turned the pages, I saw my name printed on every one of them. Bold, clear, unshaken. It was the trust agreement my wife and I had signed years ago, back when we were planning our future, long before greed had entered our home. The trust had one clause that I had almost forgotten about. It stated that any property bought, sold, or transferred under the family name would automatically revert to the trust if a fraudulent signature or coercion was involved. My wife's lawyer had insisted on adding that line. I hadn't thought about it since the day we signed it. But now, it looked like the last piece of strength I had left. I remembered sitting in that same lawyer's office decades ago, my wife beside me, smiling as we talked about leaving something behind for our son. She had always believed in protecting the future, not just his, but mine too. That trust wasn't created for wealth. It was created for safety. She had known that love could turn blind, and that one day, paper would be more honest than people. As I read the document, I realized my son had never seen it. He wasn't interested in old files or paperwork. He only cared about what could be sold. He didn't know that by transferring my property without full consent, he had activated the very clause that could take it back. My hands didn't shake this time. I placed the document on the table, straightened it, and smiled for the first time in days. The same pen that took my house away would now help me take it back. That afternoon, I went to the local municipal office. The clerk recognized me. He looked surprised to see me carrying folders instead of begging for help. I asked for the property records. He showed me the updated file, my son's name, fresh ink, shiny new ownership stamp. I asked him to add one note to the file. Disputed under existing trust claim. He hesitated at first, but agreed when I showed him the clause. He said it would take a few days for legal verification. I told him I'd wait. When I left the office, the air felt different. The town looked the same, but I wasn't the same man who had walked there a week ago. I wasn't the father who trusted blindly anymore. I was the man who built every wall in that house, paid every bill, and remembered every word on every form I'd ever signed. I wasn't old and weak. I was patient and prepared. That night, my son came home talking loudly on the phone, laughing, saying something about renting out a room in his house. I stood at the doorway and watched him. He didn't notice the old papers in my hand. He didn't care. He thought the fight was already over. When he went to bed, I sat by the window and looked at the stars. I thought about my wife again. She had always said, "Paper protects what words can't." She was right. That one clause she had insisted on was the key to everything. The next morning, I called the lawyer who had helped us draft the trust all those years ago. He was older now, but his voice was still steady. I told him everything. He went quiet for a moment, then said, "Bring me the file." I knew then that my time of silence was ending. I didn't tell my son. I didn't need to. I had signed papers once out of trust. This time, I would sign out of justice. The next week moved slower than any week of my life. Each morning, I woke up to the sound of my son's voice echoing through the house. His house, as he liked to call it now. He had started walking differently, chest out, shoulders wide, like a man who had conquered something. He'd rearranged furniture, thrown out the old rug my wife loved, and replaced my favorite chair with a new one that didn't belong. Every change felt like another nail in the coffin of my dignity. He invited friends over on the second day. They laughed, drank, and walked around the house like tourists admiring a new property. I sat outside on the porch, pretending to read the newspaper while their laughter cut through me like glass. I could hear him bragging about his place, about how he finally made something of himself. None of them knew he made it by erasing me. Every time he called it his, I felt the weight of another memory being stolen. On the third day, I went into town. The shopkeepers I'd known for years looked at me differently. They'd heard the story. Everyone had. In small towns, shame travels faster than truth. One man offered to buy me lunch out of pity. I thanked him and walked away. I didn't need food, I needed silence. By the fourth day, I realized something else. He wanted me gone. He didn't say it directly, but I could feel it. The way he looked at me when I entered a room, the way he sighed when I used the stove, the way he rolled his eyes when I coughed too loud. He told me to relax, but it wasn't kindness. It was warning. Every word out of his mouth carried a message. You don't belong here anymore. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The house creaked with the same sounds it always made, but now they felt different, unfamiliar, almost hostile. My wife's photograph on the bedside table seemed to watch me with quiet disappointment. I whispered a promise to her in my mind. I told her I wouldn't let what we built turn into his victory. I didn't know how yet, but I knew I would not leave this world humiliated. On the fifth day, he came home with paint buckets. He said he wanted to freshen up the place. I watched from the garden as he painted over the old front door, the same door I had built by hand 40 years ago. The paint dripped onto the nameplate where my initials used to be. When I wiped them with my sleeve, he told me not to touch it. I smiled, but inside, I was counting hours. By the sixth day, the neighbors stopped saying hello. I saw them whispering as I passed by. They looked at me the way people look at something broken but too polite to throw away. I went home early that day. My hands were shaking. I wasn't angry anymore. I was determined. That night, while he slept, I went to the small wooden chest in my closet. Inside was a folder, receipts, blueprints, land records, and a copy of the trust clause. I ran my fingers over every page like they were old friends. The humiliation was almost over. I could feel it. I wasn't powerless. I was patient. And patience, when mixed with truth, is stronger than revenge. By the 7th morning, I had made up my mind. I ironed my shirt, packed the folder into my briefcase, and left before sunrise. The road to the lawyer's office was long and quiet. Each step I took was heavy with memory, but lighter with purpose. The week that began with humiliation would not end with defeat. When I reached the lawyer's door, I took a deep breath before knocking. My reflection in the glass looked tired, but not weak. I had waited long enough. It was time to remind my son, and the law, who really built that house. The morning I decided to act, the air felt colder than usual. I dressed neatly, packed my documents in a worn leather folder, and walked to the lawyer's office I hadn't visited in nearly 20 years. His name was still on the door, faint but familiar. Inside, the smell of paper and coffee greeted me like an old friend. He looked older, gray at the temples, but his eyes were still sharp. He smiled faintly when he saw me and asked what brought me back. I didn't waste time with stories. I opened the folder, laid the trust papers on his desk, and told him everything my son had done. He read silently for several minutes, flipping through pages one by one. His eyebrows lifted slightly when he reached the trust clause. Then he looked up and said something I'll never forget. "Your wife was a wise woman. She saved you without knowing it." I nodded slowly. I already knew. She'd always insisted on that trust, saying one day it might protect me from something we couldn't predict. That day had finally arrived. He explained the situation carefully. The transfer of ownership my son had made was legally valid only on the surface, but the trust document overruled it. Any transaction that involved manipulation, pressure, or deceit would automatically revert to the trust's control. That meant the house could legally return to me. It would take filing, hearings, and time, but the law was on my side. He prepared the documents while I sat quietly, watching his pen move. Each signature I made that day was different from the one that had cost me everything. My hands were steady now. There was no confusion, no hesitation. I was no longer the father who trusted blindly. I was the man who had built that house with my own hands, reclaiming what was rightfully his. By the time we finished, it was almost noon. The lawyer said he'd personally deliver the filing to the registrar's office. I thanked him, but words felt too small. When I walked out, the sun felt brighter, the ground firmer. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had air in my lungs again. That evening, my son was home early. He sat in my chair, drinking from my cup, talking on the phone about his new property. He laughed loudly, like a man proud of his cleverness. I didn't say a word. I went straight to my room, closed the door, and placed the stamped legal copy of the petition inside my drawer. I didn't need to argue. I had something stronger than anger. Proof. 2 days later, the first official letter came. It was from the court, acknowledging the petition and instructing the bank to freeze all property transactions under my son's name. He found the envelope before I did. I watched from the hallway as he read it once, then twice, his expression shifting from confusion to panic. He stormed into my room holding the paper, his voice trembling with disbelief. I didn't respond. I just looked at him. Calm, quiet, unafraid. He shouted for a while, then left the room and slammed the door. That night, I sat by the window, listening to him pacing in the living room. The same steps that once carried pride now carried fear. The same man who told me to relax and let him handle everything was now the one losing sleep. It's strange how quickly power changes sides when the truth wakes up. Over the next few days, he tried to fix things behind my back. He called bankers, friends, maybe even another lawyer. But every time the trust papers blocked him. The court's freeze order stopped every move. He couldn't sell, couldn't transfer, couldn't even claim insurance. Every path he tried led back to me, the man he thought was too old to understand anything. By the end of the week, I received confirmation from my lawyer. The petition had been fully accepted. The property was officially marked under legal dispute, pending reversion to the trust. My name wasn't restored yet, but his control was gone. He no longer owned a single thing he took pride in. I placed the letter beside my wife's photo on the table and whispered softly in my mind, "We're almost home again." The following week, my son walked around like a king. He had no idea that the ground beneath him was already slipping. He hosted a dinner for his friends that Friday. Laughter filled the house, plates clattered, and glasses toasted to his success. They called him smart, bold, ambitious. I sat quietly at the corner of the table, eating slowly, watching him bask in pride that wasn't earned. He thought he had won. He didn't know that victory built on deceit doesn't last. He had started redecorating, calling contractors, talking about extensions and new furniture. He even mentioned renting out one of the rooms for extra income. I nodded as he spoke, pretending to listen. Every plan he made was another brick in the wall of his downfall. He didn't know the property had already been marked under legal dispute. He was painting walls that would soon belong to someone else again. To me. A few days later, I saw the first court notice arrive. A plain white envelope with a government stamp. He opened it at the kitchen table while sipping his coffee. His smile faded halfway through reading. His hand tightened around the paper. He looked at me for the first time in days, eyes wide, face pale. I didn't speak. I just kept stirring my tea. Silence was stronger than any argument. He called the bank right after. I could hear his voice rising in the next room. Short words, nervous tone, trying to sound in control, but failing. He stormed outside and made another call. When he came back, he avoided my eyes. He didn't eat dinner that night. The pride that once filled this house was turning into panic. The next morning, his wife started asking questions. I heard them arguing quietly behind closed doors. She wanted to know what disputed ownership meant. He told her it was a mistake, that he would fix it. But he couldn't fix what he didn't understand. The trust clause was already working, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Neighbors started talking again, this time in whispers aimed at him. The same people who once praised his success were now wondering how it had fallen apart so fast. I went to the market one morning, and the shopkeeper who used to pity me greeted me differently. He smiled and said, "I heard things are being made right again." I just nodded. Justice doesn't need to announce itself. It simply balances the scales in silence. At home, my son tried to act normal. He smiled too much, spoke too loudly, and called me Dad again like it was a word he had just learned. He made tea for me, offered help, asked about my day. I didn't fall for it. Guilt can mimic kindness, but it always shows its cracks. He wasn't kind, he was scared. He knew the game was over. By the end of the week, he received another letter, this one from the bank. His loan applications were suspended, his credit line frozen, and all property dealings put on hold. I was sitting by the window when he walked in holding the letter. He looked at me, mouth open but no words coming out. He just dropped the envelope on the table and walked away. That night, the house was quiet again. No friends, no laughter, no music. Just silence. I went outside and sat under the same porch light where I had once promised my wife I'd protect what we built. The wind was cold, but it felt clean, like the air after a storm. My son had spent months building a life on stolen ground. For 1 week, he had tasted what victory felt like. Now, all that remained was the bitter aftertaste of loss. The same pen that once betrayed me had become my weapon. The same paper that took everything from me had given it all back. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. I just smiled quietly, knowing that justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers through ink and timing. The court date came faster than I expected. I woke up early that morning, ironed my shirt, and placed the trust folder neatly in my briefcase. My lawyer met me at the entrance of the courthouse. He told me to stay calm, to let the documents speak. I nodded. I didn't need to argue. I had already done my fighting in silence. Inside the courtroom, My son sat at the opposite table. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders tense. His wife sat beside him, head down, her confidence gone. The same people who once treated me like a fool now whispered behind them, curious how a young man with everything could lose it all to the father he had betrayed. The judge entered, papers shuffled, voices hushed. My lawyer stood first and presented our case. He laid the trust agreement on the desk, pointing to the clause that my wife had insisted we include years ago. He explained how the transfer violated the trust terms, how my signature was obtained under false pretenses, how my son had failed to disclose the true nature of the documents I signed. He spoke calmly, clearly, with the precision of a man holding truth in his hands. When it was my son's turn, he stumbled over his words. He blamed confusion, misunderstanding, emotion, everything except greed. His lawyer tried to build a story of good intentions gone wrong, but the papers didn't lie. Every page showed deliberate planning. Every date lined up too neatly. Every signature from me had a corresponding withdrawal from him. It wasn't carelessness. It was calculation. The judge listened quietly, reading the documents with care. Minutes felt like hours. I kept my eyes on the floor, not out of fear, but respect for the process that was finally giving me back what I had lost. When the judge finally spoke, his tone was firm, but not cruel. He declared that the property transfer was invalid, that ownership would revert to the family trust, and that any financial gain made from it would be reviewed for restitution. For a moment, there was silence, heavy, still, complete. Then it hit me. I had won. Not through shouting or revenge, but through patience, paper, and persistence. My son looked at me across the room. His face was pale, his lips trembling. The arrogance that once lived in his eyes was gone. In its place stood something else. Realization. The bailiff handed me the certified order. My name was restored. The house was legally mine again. My hands didn't shake this time. They were steady as stone. My son stood slowly, staring at the floor. His wife didn't move. She didn't speak to him. The distance between them looked wider than the room itself. When I walked out of the courtroom, the sunlight hit my face. It felt like warmth I hadn't felt in months. The air smelled cleaner. The lawyer smiled at me and said, "Your wife would be proud." I nodded, unable to find the right words. Pride wasn't what I felt. It was closure. That evening, I went home. My home. The first thing I did was unlock the front door and stand in the hallway for a long time. I touched the wall, the same one I had built with my bare hands, and felt something settle inside me. Peace, not triumph. The photos were still gone, the rug still replaced, but the house was mine again. My son didn't return that night. I heard from a neighbor that he'd gone to stay with a friend. I didn't chase him. I didn't gloat. Some victories are meant to be quiet. He needed time to understand the cost of what he'd done, and I needed time to forgive myself, not for trusting him, but for underestimating my own strength. As the sun set, I sat on the porch and listened to the wind move through the trees. The same house that once felt heavy with shame now stood tall again. The same father who was once fooled had become the man who finished the lesson. That day wasn't just the reversal of a document. It was the reversal of power, pride, and perspective. He thought he had taken everything, but in trying to take it all, he gave me back everything that mattered: my name, my peace, and my self-respect. The days after the court ruling were strangely quiet. No celebrations, no visitors, no noise, just peace. I woke up each morning and walked through the house slowly, room by room, touching every wall like I was greeting an old friend. It felt different now. The house wasn't just wood and stone anymore. It was a symbol of survival. I had lost it, fought for it, and earned it back with patience that even I didn't know I had. The first thing I did was fix what had been broken. The gate he kicked shut, I straightened it myself. The paint he spilled on the front steps, I scrubbed it clean. The old photo of my wife, the one he had taken down, I hung back on the wall where it belonged. For the first time in years, the house looked like a home again, not a property, not an asset, but a place of peace. I moved my chair back to its old spot near the window. The morning light hit the same way it used to when my wife would sit beside me with her tea. I made sure to keep her favorite cup on the table, not because I needed it, but because it reminded me that love built this house, not greed. Every nail, every crack, every corner had a story. My son might have taken the papers, but he never understood the history written in the walls. I didn't hear from him for a while. The town did, though. Word spread fast about what happened. The same people who once pitied me now nodded respectfully when they saw me. Shopkeepers smiled again. The banker who once called me bankrupt apologized when I went to update my documents. I didn't hold grudges. The truth had spoken for itself. One afternoon, I was sitting on the porch when a car stopped at the gate. It was my son. He didn't come inside. He stood there, looking at the house like a stranger looking at something familiar but unreachable. He didn't speak. I didn't move. We just looked at each other in silence. He wanted forgiveness. I could see it in his eyes. But forgiveness isn't something you give out like spare change. It's something earned. And he hadn't earned it yet. After a few seconds, he turned around and left. The sound of his engine faded into the distance. I didn't follow. The nights became easier. I stopped waking up with anger in my chest. I stopped replaying the moment I signed those papers. The pain had turned into understanding. I wasn't the fool I thought I was. I was just a man who believed too much in family. There's no shame in love, even when it's betrayed. The shame belongs to the one who broke it. I started spending more time in the garden. The soil was dry at first, but I worked on it little by little. I planted tomatoes, some herbs, a few flowers my wife used to love. Watching them grow reminded me that even after being uprooted, life finds its way back. Some mornings, I'd sit there for hours, listening to the wind move through the leaves. No shouting, no tension, just quiet. I got letters from the court confirming the property's full restoration under the family trust. My lawyer told me the case would now serve as a precedent for others like me. That made me smile. Maybe my story would protect another old man from signing his life away under the illusion of love. Maybe someone else would learn before it was too late. My days became routine again, simple, steady, and mine. I made my own meals, balanced my own accounts, and locked my own doors at night. There was a calm pride in knowing that everything around me existed because I fought for it the right way. Now, when I sit on my porch in the evenings, the house glows under the setting sun, and I feel content. It doesn't matter how many times you're betrayed. What matters is that you never stop standing up for yourself. My son lost more than property that day. He lost my trust. I lost everything once, but what I regained was far more valuable. Peace, dignity, and the strength to never sign blindly again. He once told me, "Just sign here, Dad." I did, thinking it was love. What I didn't know was that I was signing away everything I had built with my hands, my sweat, and my faith. That one moment taught me more about life than 70 years ever did. Trust can build a home, but blind trust can destroy it overnight. I learned the hard way that blood is not a guarantee of honesty. Sometimes the cruelest thieves don't wear masks. They share your last name. Now, every morning when I walk through this house, I remind myself that every corner here has been earned twice. Once by hard work, and once by survival. It's not just a home anymore. It's proof that age doesn't mean weakness. It means patience. And patience, when pushed far enough, becomes power. I no longer look at the house with pride or anger. I look at it with understanding. Everything I lost was temporary. What I gained was permanent. Awareness. People still ask if I forgave him. I don't have an answer. Forgiveness isn't a door you open once and close forever. It's a hallway you walk through slowly, one quiet step at a time. Some days I feel pity for him. Other days, I feel nothing at all. Maybe that's what peace looks like. Not revenge, not forgiveness, just stillness. I sometimes see him from a distance. He walks past the gate, slower now, older too. Life has a way of humbling those who mock humility. He doesn't wave. I don't either. We don't need words. The silence between us carries everything: regret, realization, and the weight of choices that can never be undone. I live alone now, but I am not lonely. I eat when I'm hungry, sleep when I'm tired, and spend my evenings watching the sun drop behind the same trees that have seen every chapter of my life. I don't dream of wealth or forgiveness anymore. I just dream of quiet mornings and honest days. My hands may tremble, but they still hold my own pen. I sign nothing now without reading every word twice. If I could speak to every parent my age, I'd tell them this. Love your children, but don't hand them the keys to your life. Help them, guide them, but keep your papers, your home, your name, your independence safe. The world changes fast, and sometimes the danger isn't outside your door. It's sitting at your kitchen table, smiling as it takes your signature. He lost more than my property. He lost the right to call himself my pride, and that loss will follow him longer than any debt ever could. As for me, I didn't win through revenge. I won through patience, through remembering that the truth doesn't fade just because someone hides it behind a contract. I keep one photo of him still, the one from when he was a child, smiling with missing teeth, holding my hand. I don't look at it often, but when I do, I see two people, one who believed love was enough, and another who would one day learn that it isn't. So this is my final thought. Read before you sign, think before you trust, and never let love blind you to logic. You can rebuild a wall, a roof, a life. But once you give away your name, your control, your freedom, it takes everything to earn it back. He took my home for a season. I took back my peace forever. And between the two, I'd say I came out richer,